Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to our next guest with Donna and Sandrine. Our next guest, let me tell you a little bit about it. We are a show where real conversations ignite big ideas. We sit down with the bold thinkers, the culture shapers, the rebels, and industry disruptors to dive into the stories, insights, and the raw truth that rarely ever makes headlines. What you can expect from us is conversations with people from all across the industry: corporate, business, academia, beauty, marketplaces, literature, tech, everything and beyond. And we explore the stories behind the titles. It's going to be unfiltered, thought provoking, and always a little unexpected. This is where curiosity sparks conversation. If you're looking for deeper insights, sharper perspectives, and a human conversation that actually matters, well, then you are in the right place. And today's guest I want to introduce to you is Meera Innes. Meera, welcome to our next guest. You
Well,
are a writer and also, in your own beautiful words, an observer of the human experience. Welcome to our next guest.
thank you so much. It's so nice to be here. Mira, I'm so pleased to have you. I mean, we are so pleased and so delighted to have you on board. You are, as Donna well said, like a seasoned writer, creative strategist, and an inclusion focused consultant with a deep commitment to ethical storytelling and an eye on the evolving landscape of AI in communication. You bring both clarity and conscious to the world of content creation. You help also like brand think more deeply about voice, context, and connection. And I'm really excited to have you here because not only your professional journey is exciting, but also your personal one. Thanks a lot for being here. Thank you so much for having me.
And Meera, before we dive into all the questions, we always ask our guests this one question. Like, if we give you this virtual stage, what song would be playing as you would walk onto the stage? Or if you don't know exactly which song, what kind of genre music would be playing?
Mm. I think it's got to be soul or
Mm.
R&B, probably. And the first song that popped into my head was September by Earth, Wind& and Fire,
Oh, nice.
because that's one of my favorite songs, and it just immediately, gets me in a good mood. Also, Sunshine by Tom Misch.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a very sort of anything sort of feel good, I think. Anything with a bit of levity.
Mm.
Yeah, that get like I'm happiest when I'm dancing. So you're like, if I have my headphones on, you'll catch me walking down the street and dancing. That's
Very
great.
cool. Thanks.
Amazing. So Mira, as we said, like you are a writer, and my first question would be like, how did you discover your passion for writing? Because your journey is incredible. So you
Mm.
navigated like from one experience to another. So yeah, really curious about that. It's a good question. I actually don't really get asked that question. And I think the answer is uh it's something I've always done. And ever since I was old enough to be conscious of my conscience and that inner voice, I was always aware of a narrator, like telling the story of what I was doing and what I was seeing. And, many years later, decades later, I now understand that through the lens of autism, because that is actually an internal tool that helps us to process and understand what's happening. Um, but yeah, I think storytelling is always something that I have done to make sense of the world. And so, it just came very, very naturally to me. And I also I'm most comfortable expressing myself through words and through language. And my friend and I were talking about it the other day, like the way that I use words, and I think of it as painting with words.
Oh.
Like my word bank vocabulary is my palette, and I really take a lot of pleasure in, selecting the right
materials as they were and putting them together to express myself in a way that is as clear as possible for the person on the other end. Yeah.
Oh, I love the way that you describe like writing, like
Beautiful.
having a Canva
Yeah.
and putting your colors into it. Yeah. And
Mhm.
I know your
Mhm.
passion also for painting. So yeah,
Yeah,
to
I'm,
that.
what's the word? I have synesthesia as well, so I feel things in color. So,
Oh,
yeah, I think probably the words and how I use them tie into that as well. Yeah.
that's beautiful. Have you seen because also when you say you've always had the feeling to express that or you've always had that, how long has that been? Like since you were little or
Yeah.
something that you grew into or
Definitely since I was little, and it was one of those things that always felt so organic to me that it never actually occurred to me to do it for work, to do it
Oh,
professionally. Um, I think I kind of grew up for a very long time thinking that and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people feel this way, but that what we do for work, what we do
yeah.
professionally, are things that we have to grow into and things that we have to learn and that we have to master and we have to sort of like earn our way into a profession somehow,
Mhm.
rather than just doing the thing that comes most naturally to us. And then also there is this whole thing of, yeah, but you can't work in the arts because you'll never make any money and,
Yeah.
you can't productize that skill set, and
Yeah.
so I think that always discouraged me, and I only went into it professionally once I had a burnout, and I had a massive crash out, uh, and I don't know if either of you have ever had a burnout,
Yeah.
but, yeah, Sandrine, I know that we've spoken about this. Uh, I could not do anything. I was completely incapacitated. And I
Oh.
remember sitting there and taking stock and being like, okay, what can I do right now? What is available to me so I'm not just like horizontal in a dark room? And the only thing that came to me was writing. And I still wasn't thinking of it in terms of leveraging it as a skill set to use professionally. But it was literally just like grasping for a lifeline of what would kind of get me up. So then I started writing a lot, just for myself. Nobody, has ever read whatever I don't think I've even gone back and read it. But then at some point I was like, okay, I do need to start working again. Like this is ridiculous. So then I was like, okay, how can I leverage this into work? And I figured it out and that's how, yeah, I
Wow.
started doing it professionally.
Mm. That reminds me of really because you're talking about Canva, like of the story of Frida Kahlo when she discovered, like she went like in a really dark place, like
Mm.
the accident to discover like her talent for painting. So that you have to
Right.
discover like to get to the light, you have to go
Hmm.
maybe really deep into a dark place. And this is a bit like
Yeah.
how I can relate like to your story that
Yeah.
maybe it didn't come like it came really intuitively. It was a
Yeah.
process, it was a journey, but
Absolutely.
then
Absolutely.
it really unfolded like when you went through burnout, as you said.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's such a great perspective actually because, when I was incapacitated to the degree that it took everything away from me
Mm,
and I had to think about what I could do, it was literally just like, bodily functions and it was breathing and it was
Oh.
eating and it was
mm,
writing.
mm,
Like it came
Wow.
as naturally to me as those other functions. Yeah.
Wow. It's quite something to discover or maybe not discover, but maybe to liberate yourself
mm,
Mm.
through that process. So, you feel or you have a burnout and then slowly coming back and then releasing that part of yourself that you also have. Um, have you discovered and this is maybe a very selfish question because I'm writing a book currently and I started writing last year, so I'm a good, what is it? Maybe 15 months into writing.
mhm.
And initially I was writing and now I read my notes from back then and I'm thinking, "Oh boy, what am I thinking?" Or what was I thinking? But have you discovered for yourself too that you get better at it over time?
100%. And first of all, I've never attempted to write a book, by the way, for all the writing that I do. So
Not
I just
yet.
have so much, not
Not
yet,
yet.
exactly, but I have
Not
so much
yet.
respect for the fact that you are doing that. And yeah, like I go back and I read stuff, or like I went back and read something I wrote last weekend, and I was like, oh God, I can't say that. Like, what the, where was my head at? But also, I think, one of the ways that I learn a lot, my favorite way of learning is through being humbled. Just having my assumptions and my version of reality challenged, and having a mirror held up to me, and being shown that what I thought I was looking at is not actually how it looks at all. And just today, I learned a lot about the way that I write from my 23-year-old colleague, who
Oh,
is one of the smartest people I've ever met, let alone worked with. And he is so gifted. And he, yeah, like he fed back on some pieces I've written for work. And I was like, wow, he's absolutely right.
wow.
And that was very humbling, and I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to be humbled in that way. And I'm taking that feedback, and then it's like, well, now I have to integrate it, and that's the hard work.
Mm.
Now I have to like rewire my thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So as a beautiful, you also said you're an observer of the human experience. You definitely use that as well as a reflection of your own being and doing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think
Wow.
yeah, one of like the most mortifying experiences is, reconciling with the fact that like I am a person, I am a human. It makes me cringe all the time. Like mortified by my own existence.
The human experience.
Ah, dreadful.
Come on, Vera.
What do
Come
you
on.
think is so dreadful about it? Because I mean, I can imagine, but it's also so beautiful.
Oh, it's so beautiful. So last year I was reading the Bhagavad Gita, the
Mhm,
Hindu
mhm,
scripture,
mhm.
and there's a passage in it that basically says like at the end of the day, like spiritually, what we're aspiring to is to be like the turtle that just lives in its shell with its head and its limbs drawn in. And that's like the ultimate state of peace or nirvana.
Mm.
And I was like, isn't that hiding, not living? Like,
Oh, no.
like how I learned so much from, like I said, being humbled and experiencing life, and pain has been my greatest teacher. And how do you possibly learn anything if you're not trying to experience anything? So like, yeah, the most beautiful aspects have been the most painful.
Mhm.
Definitely. But yeah, it's also like, God, I mean, I think it's that I feel like a particularly awkward human, and I just have like a really hard time doing this. Yeah.
Oh dear. Vera, just rewinding on how we met each other, and I don't know if you remember that was like through a common friend, and then randomly like we met in this one co-working space in Berlin that was like melting or blending like art and technology, and at the time you
It's
were
factory, right?
yeah, factory.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
at the
yeah.
time you were working like with different startup. You were this creative consultant, correct me if I'm saying something wrong. And you were also like, being your own entrepreneur, freelancing and writing. And I remember at the time you were telling me, oh, okay, I'm writing like for Google. And what I found like, and to me, it's also like I have tons of admiration for you. Is that a writer for Google, knowing that they were at the genesis of Gemini. So tell us a little bit, like how did it look like to work for Google, knowing that they are so tech driven, they are so they automatized everything. They are, really forward thinking when it comes to the future. And you were telling you're an observer of the world.
Yeah.
How was this experience?
So that was interesting because I don't know if you recall, but Google was a little bit late in the day to introducing its AI product. It was ChatGPT first, and then suddenly there was this scramble to we have to release our own AI. And then it was kind of behind and it was buggy and it was making mistakes and it was just all very like humiliating. Um, but because of that, I got to experience like a longer period of working with Google for Startups where we were telling human focused stories about their portfolio companies. And at the time, it was a DEI initiative, Google for Startups was. It was a fund, essentially a program that existed for underrepresented founders from marginalized communities. And, with the background that I'd had working in tech, where it is so skewed towards a certain demographic, and, there's something like 3% of VC funding going to female founders and something like 0.01 going to founders of color. It was just so great to work, to be part of an initiative where we were telling stories and like amplifying the experiences and the companies of these other founders who didn't get their stories told. So I really enjoyed that for a while. And then when the shift, two things happened. First, there was AI, there was Gemini. Suddenly, the focus of storytelling became much more AI driven. That was what we were trying to amplify. But yeah, so then the focus became much more on how are these startups using AI? And then, the sort of origin stories of the companies did come into it and the aspect of, them representing their communities and that part was still there. But gradually the focus was more and more on AI. And then simultaneously, pretty much, what happened in the US was, they scrapped DEI. And suddenly the messaging of the stories that we were telling, of the fund itself, of the program changed dramatically. And there was kind of an erasure of the DEI piece because there had to be. And credit to Google, they kind of retained that part of their identity for longer than most other organizations did. They kind of stood by that. But then I think it got to the point where yeah, they were no longer able to continue doing that. So,
I see.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
This whole AI and content and writing, I mean, I'm curious about your writing perspective on that because since ChatGPT, you hear about all these jobs that are related to content writing
Yeah.
are disappearing. What's your perspective on that?
Listen, I think first of all, it is happening. Whether it's happening sustainably is another question. Whether that's actually a tangible long-term permanent shift that we're seeing, that I don't think so, because I think there will be a correction at some point. But the way that and the reason that I'm skeptical of this like mass exodus to AI right now, and I'm always skeptical about any mass exodus, and I'm always the one hanging back and saying, if I see everyone doing something, I'm just like, wait a minute, guys, like someone needs to hang back and see if this is a good idea. And I just kind of think of this mass adoption of AI as a toddler on a sugar high.
Mm.
It's
Mhm.
just, it's so accessible. And I don't think it was ever meant to be this accessible. I think it was meant to have, very impactful, because it's such a powerful technology, real world applications to very technical fields, to the sciences, for example. And it was really supposed to be helping us. And the fact that that same technology is this accessible to everybody, and everyone's just having a field day with it. And
Mm.
when toddlers are on a sugar high and they consume too much sugar, at some point they crash and they start crying. So I'm sort of waiting for that to happen. And I'll be very interested to see what happens when it does. But I don't think that You know, I still think AI is not a replacement for the human voice.
No.
No, and that's becoming abundantly clear the more that brands are kind of like scrapping their copywriters and great, we can just do this in-house ourselves. And it all sounds the same. It's like this brand and this brand's like, great, you have the same messaging.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good job, you know. So I don't think it's I think it's getting to the point now where after the initial sort of upsurge, that people are starting
Yeah.
to be a bit more discerning, I think.
Mm, I'm totally with you.
Yeah,
Mm.
totally. And that reminds me also one of those conversations that we had lately, Donna and I, with another guest who is trend forecaster, and she was also telling like you, I'm waiting for the day where we go back to analog, so that because everything is so digital now, we are so digitally connected that we will
Yeah,
also make our step back to something like more offline or more human, or a little bit
totally.
less articulated or less filtered and
Yeah.
layered. Mira, I want also like to because you have a great and multicultural background. So you're also British Indian. You grew up also like in Japan. Now
Oh.
you're a writer. So it feels to me that even your own story is also like kind of a book. Um, how would you describe yourself? A citizen of the world, or how would you picture yourself like being this observer of the world, but also coming from different backgrounds that in a way
Mhm.
also complete each other, or are also slightly different from each other?
I think in a word, confused. Just like spread very thin all across everywhere. And there's like a there's a part of me that's relevant in every place. Um, but it, you know, all of it amounts to this whole that no one person knows.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? I don't know if you watched this film, Past Lives, that came out last year.
Oh, tell us more about it.
Oh my goodness, it was such a beautiful movie. I'll try and keep it very brief, but it's
What a
about
teaser.
a Korean American girl who emigrates to the US when she's like 12 or something. She leaves behind her best friend back home in Seoul. And then, you know, she grows up and she becomes an American and she marries an American, and, you know, that's like her, and that's that version of her from like 12 onwards. And then her childhood best friend kind of resurfaces in her life. This was the beginning of like Facebook and Skype. They reconnect, and then at some point he comes to visit her in the US. And to me, this story was, you know, it's not a love story as much as it's a story about diasporic identity.
Mm.
You know, that suddenly there reappears in her life someone that knows a version of her that nobody has known for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And that part of her is still very much there, but nobody's ever met her in that version of her life that she lives in now.
Wow.
And that really, and you know, there's one scene where her husband is saying, you know, you talk in your sleep in Korean, and he said, like, I can't understand you, and there is this whole part of you that I don't know, and I can't speak to, and I don't understand. And you know, I thought there are these two men that love her in this story. Neither one of her loves her for the whole of who she is, because they don't know the whole of who she is.
Wow.
Wow.
Both of them only know this one version of her, and it's like, and I feel like that, you know, who knows me for the entirety of who I am? And I think my brother is probably the only person in the world, because we've been through that journey together. Um, but yeah, it's a very interesting experience, and I think probably a lot of people have this experience where it's like no one knows you as like a whole and complete person when you have all of these different identities that belong to different places, which is a gift as well.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because you used to live like in Japan, like since, I mean, how long? So you grew up there and
14.
14 years. And you
Yeah.
do speak
Mhm.
Wow.
Japanese
I
also
do.
fluently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Wow. That's amazing. It's very rich, right? I mean,
I'm
you
very
have
lucky. Mhm.
Yes, absolutely. But also to have had and still have this opportunity to also understand other cultures. I always feel that it makes us better humans, when you've lived abroad or when you grew up in a different culture, different perspectives.
Yeah.
Um, it's really enriching for the soul, I think.
I think it's so important for humanity. Like,
Hmm.
if you look at any point in the history of humanity, I think, but particularly where we are now, the state of the world and what's happening, I think it all comes from fear of the unknown and fear of people who are not
Hmm.
us. And just like what would happen if those gaps were bridged, if we had a more well-rounded, well-informed perspective of not only knowing other people, but also experiencing them and identifying with them.
Mm, mhm, mm.
Yeah.
And on that note, because you have like this multicultural background that you just mentioned earlier, that you've been lately diagnosed from autism. Um, I am because we know each other, but we never really discussed about it. What did it change for you discovering like this aspect of yourself? Was that something that you were suspecting, or how did you start actually? How did you come up maybe with the proactively to decide, okay, I might do the test, or I might feel, sorry to say like that, different or
Hmm.
special or unique
No, no,
in
no.
some ways?
Yeah. Like there is no this. Like I
Yeah.
always felt different,
Mm.
completely. And as for how it felt, I'll answer that question first. When you're having your eyes tested and they put in like the different lenses and then it's like all foggy and you can't see anything and you're trying to, and then they put in the right ones, like the right prescription, and you're like, and then you have clarity and you can, like,
Wow.
that's exactly how getting the diagnosis felt. I was like, oh, I can see now.
Mm.
Wow.
And I was wearing someone else's glasses the whole time, which is what being undiagnosed feels like because you're viewing life and reality through the lens of someone else's, like how you're told it's supposed to look, but
Mm.
that's not how you feel. And there's this dissonance that's always very confusing, and you can't make sense of it and understand, like, well, this is what they're telling me it should look like, but this is what it looks like to me. And um, so how I got to that was the same way that a lot of adult women are being diagnosed now, which is when a child that they are related to becomes diagnosed. So there are a lot of moms now who have kids who, and now these days it's picked up very early in children. And then when that diagnosis happens, then by extension, either, the parents recognize it themselves or the doctors, ask who else. And that's what happened to me is my nephew was diagnosed very early. Um, and the craziest thing about it was that I recognized it in him, even though I didn't know what I was recognizing. So I was there on the day that he was born. So I met him when he was like, I don't know, 4 or 6 hours old or something. Um, and we talk about this all the time with my brother and his ex partner, who's still one of my best friends. Um, I looked at him in his little, like, hospital crib, and I turned around to his parents, and I was like, "Oh, you guys, he's gonna have a hard time. He's just like me."
Really? You
Oh,
said that
Yeah,
intuitively?
yeah,
wow.
and none of us knew what that meant at the time. It's like we'd always known that I was very sensitive, and I think we assumed that that's what I was seeing. And then he gets a bit older and, he gets this autism diagnosis, and the doctor said, well, who else it's genetic, so who else in the family is, on the spectrum? I'm the first one in my family who's diagnosed apart from my nephew. And his mom just got on the phone to me and she was like, yeah, so the doctor just said they just thought of me straight away.
Wow.
Yeah. So then I got a
Wow.
diagnosis. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Well, I think it's beautiful how you described that, you're putting on the right glasses, that you were always wearing
Mhm.
someone else's glasses. And I think that's a very powerful statement because not only does it help you see clearer, but it also it gives you an outlook
Yeah.
onto where you're going and what you can now do with that. Have you noticed from yourself that you are behaving different now that you know? Or did it help you maybe put things into place? Like, oh, that's what was going on.
Yeah. So I think the first year I was just trying to process it. I was trying to make sense of my whole life before
Mm.
that point with this new information. And one thing people who've been diagnosed later in life talk about a lot is the grieving. There was
Mm.
a lot of grieving that I didn't, that I'd grown up my whole life and I'd been this child and all into adulthood, not having had the support that I needed. Because, you look at the support now that's available to autistic children and, it's they're tools essentially. And, you understand yourself and you learn to manage yourself. And I think, I spent most of my life in so much pain, and
Mm.
so much confusion from not having had that support or even awareness available to me. So there was a lot of grieving and this piece of like, because there are still so many things that I struggle with, and this piece of I wonder who I might have been if I had had that
Huh?
support, you know? But that's not something that I try not to dwell on that too much because I also really believe, like, one of my core beliefs is that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. So this whole journey was necessary and, this version of me is who I was supposed to be. Um But yeah, that was like it was very, very sad, and I don't know if you can hear, like, I'm still very sad now when I think about that. Um, but then after that, there's something that happens called unmasking, and masking is like it's a term for what autistic people do in order to assimilate and to fit in.
Mhm.
So, we look at what everyone else is doing and we're like, "Okay, that's normal," and then we emulate that, so nobody can tell that we seem different, and that we're not targeted in any way. And what's really interesting with masking is every now and again you'll be caught off guard in a situation that you don't have like a template for, and
Mhm.
suddenly you like don't know how to behave, or like then it'll show, and then other people will be like, "Wait, you
Mm.
don't seem normal," which is like a really frightening situation to be in for an autistic person.
Mira, for the ones
Mm.
who do not really know, like what is autism, and there is also in some degree, Asperger, there are like different like levels. Would you mind like telling us like some examples of what felt to you like special or maybe extraordinary? And now that you know that you've been diagnosed, oh, okay, it's part of like the autism spectrum, actually.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, they say that we know less about autism now than we ever have done because
Yeah,
it just turns out that
fully.
because there was like a basically like a whole gender that has been neglected this whole time. And then now suddenly we're looking at girls and women and it turns out that autism looks so different than, we
Mhm.
thought that it did through this very limited
Yeah.
uh, lens of just looking at boys. So we're still learning a lot about it. And I think now a lot of professionals, from what I've heard, think of autism more as like an umbrella term for something very, very broad. So I can't speak to my experience being representative of autism as a whole. But certainly for me, and I think this is the case for a lot of people, is uh, we receive so much information all the time. And I think of myself as like, okay, this is my body that you can see, but what you can't see is all of like the tentacles and the nerve endings like coming out like this. And those are all around me all of the time
Yeah.
receiving so much information. So, you know, at any one time I'm being inundated sensorily, visually, sound, smells, and it's a lot to process. And, every now and again, there's something called like the autistic meltdown, where it just gets too much, or there's like a combination of like too many different things happening, and I just short circuit and I will
Mm.
like fall apart, have a meltdown. Um, and yeah, I I think that is sort of like stereotypically the impression that a lot of people have of autistic people is like these meltdowns and screaming and crying and being like
Yeah.
really, really dysregulated. And that's, yeah, that's sort of the impression that a lot of, so when people hear that I'm autistic and they're like, oh, but you don't look autistic, I'm like, I'm trying really hard not to have one of those meltdowns like all the time. And if I hadn't made it my job to self-regulate and to learn how to do that, trust me, I would look like that a lot of the time.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
But it also
Gosh.
makes me very good at a lot of things. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and in some ways, I can imagine that, yes, that might be like a relief to discover also that you've been diagnosed, but also you might have also, it could explain like some talents of yours that you have and some strengths, because I mean, deep
Mhm.
inside also, like, we see a lot or we read a lot about like autism. There is also like this
Mhm.
spot of brilliance. I mean, not
Yeah,
all, and as you said, and there are so many layers, and there are like some
yeah.
that are like
Mhm.
deeply diagnosed, but there are also
Mhm.
others that are, I mean, I mean, or I can describe you as an artist. You're really versatile in the way that you approach art, and they're pretty gifted in some ways, also
Mhm.
like in specific areas. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's super
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I always joke that I didn't get like, the useful autism that I could have like leveraged into a
Oh, yeah.
career. Like, I'm not a brilliant mathematician. I don't I don't have tangible skills that I can show to someone and be like, yeah, but I'm really gifted though. My skills are more like the power of perception and maybe self-expression. Um I because I receive so much information, I pick up on a lot of nuances that I've realized escape other people, and I'm just not seeing like, I'm seeing a really, like, zoomed in detail version of what a lot of other people are seeing. Like, I'm seeing things in, like, really high definition, and I don't just mean visually, I mean situations and emotionally too. I pick up on energy, I pick up on how people are feeling. Just all of those little nuances are like very crystal clear to me. Yeah. And that does feel like a gift, but it's also an impediment in the sense that you can't always let other people know about that or make
Mm.
people aware of that because it can make people feel very exposed because they didn't necessarily share that,
Yeah.
voluntarily share that information with you.
Yeah.
Amazing. You sound like you're very much in tune with what it means to be human. I wish all humans were like that. I mean, we should all be in tune with a little bit of empathy for our surroundings, our people. I mean, that's what humanity is all about. We may want to be in a corporate environment and work it away, but that's what it's really all about, I think.
It's
So
really nice. Thank you for saying that.
thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's
So,
beautiful.
yeah, really, really nice. I see also like the time. I mean, we could go
Mhm.
on and on and on. I don't know, like, Donna, if you have like any other question you would like to ask. I mean, I
I
could
would
ask
just
about
wanna say
Japan or your last
no,
trip to
Mira,
Japan.
I want to really actually encourage you to write a book because 'cause I'd wanna read it. I mean, it
Mhm.
sounds like you're first of all, you're a joy to listen to, so maybe an audiobook is
Oh,
also an idea.
Oh,
thank you.
D I will happily buy your book the minute you start writing, or I'll put it on my Kindle and listen to your stories because really you have a way of telling that I
Oh,
truly appreciate and enjoy so much. So,
thank you.
yeah,
I really
like
appreciate
Sandrine
that.
says, I mean, I could listen to you all afternoon. We have another hour, let's go. I mean, no, really, you've been a joy to listen to.
yeah, thanks a
Thank
lot
you
for
both
that.
so much. I really appreciate you asking such insightful questions and really encouraging me to share. Yeah, I didn't have these answers prepared, like you got them out of me, so thank you. You're wonderful conversationalists.
Aw, thank
Oh,
you.
thank you.
As
Maybe
you.
yeah, maybe one last question because I'm getting curious. What's next for you? Because
Oh,
you are a globetrotter. You are
Yeah.
actually writing stories and amplifying voices from other people. What's here for you now and
It's
next?
really interesting. So I'm in like the sort of like stability phase of my life now. I think all of these things that I've just shared with you are the result of, having freestyled it for so long. And I've been flying by the seat of my pants and having experiences and learning a lot about myself. And I just got to a point now where I need to feel the ground beneath my feet.
Yeah.
I need some structure. I need some safety. I need to learn. And I've just joined a wonderful company with, as I mentioned earlier, like some of the smartest people I've ever met. It's a very nurturing space. It's very inspiring. I'm learning so much every day, which is exactly what I want to be doing. So that's me for the foreseeable. I'm just going to stay still and learn and get good at things that I haven't been good at until now and see where that takes me.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the
Yeah.
delight. What a treat to have you.
Thank you both. I appreciate you.
Bye. See you next time.